Welcome to the week 2 wrap up. Going to get this in before Sunday Night Football. I think Sunday Night Football is going to be a really good game. There were a lot of damn good games today. Not to mention, the Panthers damn near pulled a rabbit out of their hat in the desert at the end of the day. We're watching all these good games. We're watching Jacksonville, Cincy, and all that, and Dallas. Russ is throwing moon balls. Aubrey's hitting like a 75-yard kick. It was an electric end of 1 p.m. slate, and in the 4 p.m.s, you got the Kansas City Philly heavyweight matchup. And honestly, it is a heavyweight matchup, but I kind of look at it like two teams, two heavyweights that they're not fully formed right now. The Eagles have made some moves in the last week. Zadarius Smith, who showed up in this game in some spots, Tank Bigsby, who we didn't see. But more than anything, I think, the Eagles in the secondary are working some things out. And offensively, I think are also working some things out. Kevin Patullo gets the win, but I'm sure some people are going to question the fact that, until late in the game, the Eagles didn't have a pass more than 6 yards down the line of scrimmage. I think Burkhardt jinxed the Chiefs in that situation, because really what it took, and if we're evaluating Jalen Hurts, I'm evaluating him on not making any big mistakes. And when he was zeroed up, and Spags did bring a lot of pressure, he knew where to go with the football. It's not like they had any hots, but it was a situation, late in the game where Spags loads up, they zero up, and he puts the ball beautifully on Smitty. Did that a couple times. Smitty came down hard on his back earlier in the game, but to have the wherewithal to make that throw on McDuffie, Smitty, Mr. Reliable. He ends up being the deep ball outlet that they didn't really use a whole bunch in that area of the field, but when they did, they made it count. And then A.J. Brown caught a lot of balls underneath that really made a huge difference in this game. Didn't see the huge plays from A.J. Brown, but, we all know watching Eagles football that, if that slant window's open or it's not closed, rather, even if it's super contested, he's going to be the guy that comes down with the football. So, I'd like to see the Eagles offense run the ball better. Obviously they're able to close it out with that 9-yard run, which really puts you behind the 8 ball. You'd almost rather just let them get the first down if you're Kansas City in that situation. But I think the game comes down to this. It's like the Chiefs are not in their current form a Super Bowl contender. That's an 0-2 football team. So it feels good to go into Arrowhead, get that win, but certainly not, the measuring stick. I think for Kansas City, it was more of a measuring stick. I think for the Eagles, they're going to play better teams than Kansas City, and they're a better football team right now. And it showed down the stretch. Now here's what plays into, my analysis of Kansas City not being a very good football team right now is they're doing very un-Kansas City-like things. Like Travis Kelce drops, the one on the goal line's huge, right? Ends up with a Makuba pick, and Josh Simmons, who evidently runs 18 miles an hour, saves a touchdown. But that's the huge swing in the game. And, in the first half, when I'm watching the Chiefs offense, it really was a one-man show. It was all Mahomes. It was all Mahomes and bad rush lanes, or Mahomes and a pump fake and a scramble. He really is. Listen, you want to add to the list of things that Kansas City did uncharacteristically poorly. He missed Thornton on, what should have been a touchdown. And the, Eagles secondary, I think the last one that actually ended up a touchdown there in cover 3, and Blankenship jumps the deep over and, leaves the post wide open. So there's things that the Eagles secondary needs to work out. But Patrick Mahomes certainly expects to throw the football better in crunch time. And that would have taken some time off the, would have left some time on the clock so that maybe they weren't in such a shitty position at the end of the football game. People are going to talk about the tush push. And, I know the whole world's sick of the tush push. It is what it is at this point. If I were a fan of another team, I'd probably be tired of it. But the Eagles have mastered it, and it doesn't help when they did get away with a couple of false starts. So just on the record, I'm not going to ignore that in this analysis. The game could go differently if they're calling those according to the rules, but they didn't in this scenario. And so, it just ends up, in a situation where I think the most interesting thing in this chess match between the two defensive coordinators, Spags and Fangio, the Italian mafia out there, Fangio brought more pressure. Spags pressured more than half the time, like pretty much the whole day. But Fangio brought more pressure. And I think Mahomes at this stage in his career, this not stage because this isn't a stage that he can't get out of, that's been brought on by old age or decline or something like that. It's just the fact that he's throwing the ball to fucking nobody outside. Nobody outside. At this stage, you can blitz Patrick Mahomes because the thing about Patrick Mahomes is this is like he gets greedy. And in a game like this, if you pressure him, he's looking for the home run ball. He's not looking for the check down. He's not looking for the hot. And so, you know, as the Chiefs go down the road, I'm going to be really interested to see how people call games against them. It's amazing to me, watch the Chiefs, who have quite possibly the best football player on the planet, if we're weighting quarterback into the equation. I mean, Mahomes is probably that guy. And they don't really have anybody to throw to outside. And they can only score 17 points on a good Eagles defense, but not the defense they faced in the playoffs or in the Super Bowl last year. And then the 1 p.m. slate, I'm watching, you know, Browning throw to the Monstars outside, basically all-world receivers, and they can move the ball. They can score the football. But it's amazing to me that, like, somebody as good as Patrick Mahomes with an offensive coordinator like Andy Reid can't take advantage of a matchup, can't put together mistake-free football. I'm, you know, if you're a Chiefs fan, you're probably very disappointed in the way you start this season. And I think the first 2 games are marred by very un-Chiefs-like things. You know, starting with Xavier Worthy running into Travis Kelce on mesh week 1, and you lose your vertical threat. Now it's got to be Thornton. So I want to shout out a couple guys on the Eagles defense. I mean, Nolan Smith made a huge play on 4th down. I mean, he is an absolute dog. He's one of my favorite players on the Eagles because he sets edges. He can rush the passer. He's going to be their BG from here on out. You know, kind of the do everything edge that might not wow you with 12, 13 sacks a season. You know, he might not make Pro Bowls, but that guy can play football. And his big play showed up. I mean, we're going to pay attention to the Makuba pick, but I also thought, like, very uncharacteristic to look at the Chiefs and being so desperate to go right out of the half like that. But, you know, you feel good about Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid with the ball in their hands on 4th down. They just could not convert in that situation. And so, yeah, I don't know what to take away from this game. I think the takeaway is neither of these teams they're both works in progress. But I think the Eagles have a higher ceiling, and, you know, I'll stick to that. I think losing Goddard for this game hurt them, but I also am watching an offense that's kind of working through some identity issues, and certainly, like, Landon Dickerson didn't play great inside. You know, I wonder if he's 100% healthy. And defensively, Adoree Jackson's still out there. And the pass rush is one where you are going to have to manufacture some pass rush at times a little bit more. So, and for the Chiefs, obviously, they're banged up. Hollywood Brown left the game for a moment at one point. I'm saying, like, what the fuck are they going to do now? So they're definitely working through some things. Also, Fulton didn't play, or he played and left the game. So a secondary it's certainly not perfect. Losing a guy like that definitely matters. But I don't know. The one encouraging thing for the Eagles is we talk about, like, this chess match that Fangio's got to play is, you know, Makuba. There was one point in the game where he knocked down a mesh on, I think, 3rd and short. It was a money down, and it's Hollywood Brown. It's their best receiver, and Makuba's on him and sorts through the trash pretty well. You know, Brown dips under Bond at that point, which gives Makuba a chance. But the point is like, when you're looking for an arrangement of defensive backs that works for you, maybe this guy can play the slot in a pinch. You know, that's basically what he's doing on that play. You know, much the same way Cooper DeJean came to the rescue last year, played the slot for the Eagles and made everything go. You know, maybe this year in a pinch, Makuba can play nickel for them. We will see. But for the Chiefs, I mean, you look at their schedule coming up: Giants, Ravens, Jaguars, Lions, and then they get the Raiders, who they always kind of have a hard time with. I don't want to say always, but so for the Chiefs, it's a new world out there where nothing's easy. and they gotta move the ball down the field 3 plays at a time. I saw a really interesting statistic today where it was Chiefs offensive rankings during the Bieniemy era, and now the last 2 years with Nagy. And they're pretty middle of the road the last 2 years. As bad as they've looked, they're like 15th in offense over the last 2 years, and they're habitually a top 5 group. Now, I understand that talent factors into that, but one thing that they said about Eric Bieniemy was the details were always right, because he was that dude that kind of got in people's shit when they weren't on the details. And, I don't want to put it all on Nagy. Obviously, the personnel matters, but I think you probably do miss a guy like that. So big win for the Eagles. None of them are easy in the NFL, and to go into Arrowhead, no matter what the Chiefs look like in that moment, it's a big win. Now the 1 p.m.s, the game that I was watching closely in the 1 p.m.s was Jacksonville and in Cincinnati. And listen, Browning is back. It's Browning season, because Joe Burrow leaves the game in the first half, kind of a situation where, and early in this game, if you're a Bengals fan, you're like, damn, the protection again. And Ford's in the game. That's not what you want. Risner's in the game. Risner, I see why he was on the street. I mean, no disrespect, but it doesn't look like a plus at guard right now. And ultimately, he is the one who gets beat on the Burrow sack. Armstead grabs his ankle. I mean, it's an accident. It happens. You're trying to hold on because you're trying to get your sack as a defensive lineman. And I think his weight ends up on Joe, and Joe's toe is probably turned completely under the pile there. Evidently, it's turf toe. Turf toe sucks. It's not easy to play with. Evidently, there's some torn ligaments in there. And what the verbiage I heard was several weeks. And if you look at the Bengals schedule coming up, that's really rough. Nolan, pull that up for me while I talk about the Bengals. But the next month of the season, the good news is like, holy shit, the Bengals are 2-0. They can never put it together. They're 2-0 to start the season, and they lose their stud quarterback. They're going to be at Minnesota, at Denver, who looks a lot more beatable than people thought, I think. Sorry, Reed. Detroit at home, and then at Green Bay. So that's like a little bit of a buzzsaw. You talk about a defense that is just kind of hanging on at times, going to play the Packers or the Lions, and you look at Jake Browning, the prospect of him getting a win on the road in Minnesota, like it becomes a lot harder. So good news, bad news. The good news is I think they're the number 1 team in the AFC North as it stands right now, which is kind of wild. Who had that on their bingo card, that the Bengals will be first in the AFC North 2 weeks into September? What the fuck is going on? But then you lose Joe Burrow, and yeah, like protection was a problem. I mentioned Ford. I mentioned Risner. I even saw P. Ryan bust the protection early. And the Jags do a really good job on third down, at least early in the season, of bringing pressure. They like to feature some mug looks. They got after Bryce Young. I wondered if they'd try to get after Joe Burrow, and they did. But I thought the Bengals going 90 yards at the end of the game to win it, converting on fourth down twice, went at, Travis Hunter for the big one. And the ball's in the air and it's sailing, and Yoshivas enters the picture. And I'm like, what the fuck? Why would you throw the ball to Yoshivas? No disrespect on fourth down, all the guys you have out there, but they went at Travis Hunter. They get the PI. I got no issue with the call. And they end up getting the touchdown after a pretty wild sequence in the low red. And when they lined up with about a minute to go on the 1 yard line, I said, like, that's kind of the worst thing that could happen to Jacksonville here, is that this takes a few plays. And the Risner false start, everybody's all pissed off, but it ends up really costing Jacksonville because they get the ball back with not a lot of time left. So ends up being a heroic Browning drive, who threw, I think, about 3 picks. He really doesn't see it over the middle of the field, or he wasn't seeing it over the middle of the field today. Somebody's got to remind him that just because he watches Joe Burrow every day do things in practice and in the film room, he can't do those things. Stick to the sidelines. If you want to take a shot, take it on outside the numbers where the sideline can protect you, and you've got single coverage, and you let those big SOBs go up and do what they do. I mean, like at one point, Jamar Chase had like 10, 11 targets in the first half, and it caught about 95% of those footballs. So, I think coming out in the second half, being able to establish the run a little bit, getting some screen stuff to hit, but also hitting something at the intermediate level of defense with Browning, taking a little bit of heat off of him was big. Honestly, the play of the game was Trey Hendrickson in the red zone, because at that point you're down 7-0, and this Jacksonville team, they can kind of walk you up and down the field. They just can't get out of their own way. 7-0. You're really beat on the play, but Trey Hendrickson's got a great rush going, and you end up with a short arm throw, pick. You're able to hang in there in a game that was going to be like score, answer. And so going down 2 would have been a really bad deal. 2 scores early in this game. Trey Hendrickson saying, that's why the fuck they paid me. And at the end of the game, the closer with the sack. The strength of this Jags team is potentially the pass game. Like, that's what it is. When you look at the Packers, the depth of receivers that they have now, they lost Jaden Reed and that sort of thing, but they got Tucker Kraft. They have Josh Jacobs in the run game. You can dump it down to him on a screen, whatnot. You look at Jacksonville, they've got ETN, they've got Tootin, who sat somebody down in the red zone today. Looks like a pretty solid pickup for them, and the reason they're confident enough to send Tank Bigsby to Philly. You have ETN, you have Brian Thomas Jr., you have Travis Hunter. You have Shedeur Sanders wishes he had these weapons. You also have Strange, and you've got De'Ami Brown. I mean, and Washington made some plays today. So there's a lot of good receivers on this team. And Trevor Lawrence, when he's locked in, was finding the voids in zone. When they got man, they kind of picked on a few people. One of them for sure was who'd they pick on today in the first half? They were absolutely torching. Yeah, it was Turner. They were torching Turner. Whenever he got man coverage, they went to Turner. All those guys, when they're at their best, it's hard to cover this team. But the one thing that will keep this offense grounded is Trevor Lawrence not being perfect. And I don't mean perfect all the time, but in the moments that perfection is demanded, it's like Liam Cohen on the sideline saying, hey, put it on his chest. Okay, and then Trevor Lawrence is doing this because the honeymoon stage is over there. I'm not going to make more of that than there needs to be, but a little frustration because a couple of those balls were sprayed. And, the Cincinnati defense that was really opportunistic week 1, again, opportunistic this week, made plays on the ball. They're not going to be a great group, but if they can make plays on the ball, they can kind of hang in there. The Bengals defense taking a lot of shit, gave up 250 yards basically in the first 15 minutes of the game, but they took advantage when there were opportunities. And the most troubling thing, though, about the guys outside for Jacksonville, I mean, De'Ami Brown dropped a huge, huge ball. I mean, that's a colossal drop. I think he had another in the red zone. But Brian Thomas Jr. being targeted 12 times and having 3 catches is not how I had it drawn up, especially against this Bengals group. And the most troubling thing for me is seeing, and I don't know how else to say this. I mean, alligator arms would be one way, but not being competitive at the catch point because of footsteps. There were a couple instances of that so bad that after the game, Cohen is asked about it. And he's like, well, I need to look at that. And when he looks at it, he won't like it. So, yeah, I think real scrappy win by the Bengals. And another tip of the cap to P. Ryan, who's back, quiet pickup. Talked about him missing a pickup in pass pro, but he's really good in the return game, and he helped them. So the Bengals, tons of penalties, procedural stuff. I think they had a face mask in a key spot defensively. Just a sloppy game. They've got a lot of firepower, but the quarterback, the field general, has to play, and he's got to be on his details. So last thing is this in that game. Get Joe Burrow a fucking gator. Drive him off the field. The face of the franchise is hurt again, and I'm watching him limp to the locker room. Evidently, I found out that the Bengals are the only team that don't have a UTV or an ATV or a gator or something. Get a Revolutionary War gurney, dude. I don't care, but get him the fuck off the field. These Bengals, the owners in Cincy, the Browns, they're cheap as fuck. They got an above ground pool, and nothing against an above ground pool, but the budget demands for something a little bit more regal. And I just think of the Bengals as maybe the cheapest team in football. And I'm looking at, they don't even have a cart to get their quarterback off the damn field. So that was wild. I also, fun moment today watching Brandon Aubrey hit. I mean, not a fun moment if you don't like the Cowboys, but like, it's anytime Brandon Aubrey lines up from like the tip of the star to kick the football, I'm all in. I love seeing them say, like, let's see how far he can kick it. That was a lot of fun. Bouncing around the league. I also saw Detroit. Can't wait to dive into that all 22 because they had about 8 yards of play. 8.8 yards of play. It's a franchise record. And you're hearing chants of "fuck Ben Johnson" in the stadium, which I think is a little like after the game, Jared Goff was like, yeah, he did a lot here. Probably don't want to do that. But without having looked at the tape, it's probably a lot more the same. I saw some of the detail type things that Chicago and that quarterback were fucking up. And also on a day like today, remember when like the hottest topic in the NFL, and it was the biggest binary choice in America, was like outside of politics, was like Justin Fields or Caleb Williams. And on a day like today, it feels like nobody won. Like you watching Justin Fields, I think he went 3 for 11 in New York. Buffalo just choked the life out of him, played keep away, keeping their D-line off the field, if you know what I mean. And Josh Allen, fantastic. I think the Bills bouncing back, if that's like the right way to term it, from like a game that went till midnight the other night and there were 81 points scored. That's a big letdown spot for a Bills team that generally doesn't score. I saw a statistic like they hadn't scored over 23 points on the Jets in a while. And that's a team that kind of gives them a tough day at the office, but they had 30 points before you even like barely got out of the half. And so that's a really, really good spot for the Bills, looking like a contending football team, even with some guys down. Ed Oliver down. We're still waiting to see Maxwell Hairston's debut. Trey White's up for them. So, I would say I want to give out one shout out. And Eagles fans, you're gonna be like Leo pointing at like this was me at the end of the Saints game. Bryce Huff made a play. I think Bryce Huff made a play with the game on the line in a game that nobody's watching. They might as well have played that game in a hangar. But that was good to see. I mean, like, even Eagles fans, I think you can appreciate when a guy really, really hits rock bottom and bounces back somewhere. So I'm happy to see him make a play. I don't know what else I missed. We got a lot that we're going to hit tomorrow in the 2 p.m. slot for the live show, but just an electric day of football. And the Seahawks. I told y'all about the Seahawks. Look out, man. They play good defense. I thought they took more shots this week, ran the football. That's a good football team. Look out for the Colts. Told you they're legit. They look legit tonight, and they got the win. Dirtiest word in football, re-kick. Cowboy Reed was sitting here about to have a conniption because they had to kick the ball twice for the win, and the Colts got the W. So another good day at the office for Locks. We were 3-1 3-0 until Jonathan Taylor didn't catch his third reception of the day, but we can't be perfect. Now we're gonna pray for the over tonight. Hey, locals, hit the landline tomorrow, or hit the landline tonight. You got to take Chiefs fans. You're having a hard time. You want to take it out. You want to talk about Andy Reid. You want to drag your coach through the mud a little bit. We've been kid gloving Andy Reid for a long time. Let's talk about it. Why is this offense so shitty right now? 202-991-0723. That's the Green Light Hotline. 202-991-0723. That is the Green Light Hotline. Hit us up and leave us. If you're shit-faced, gather your faculties and leave us a message. We will listen to it tomorrow on the show. Please call us. Week 2, just absolutely electric. Is there anything else, guys? I think we're good. The Ravens even took care of business. They didn't blow a lead or anything. That was a full day of football. Sign me off, Cowboy.